drafted software interface is done in like 5 minutes. I don't see how like eventually it doesn't have to become like the industry standard. So like,
Well,
yeah, I
that's
am far
that's
ahead.
where it's like okay. So in your
Yeah,
example, I'm not saying that like I don't know much about your tech, and I'd love to learn more. So like, feel free to like pin it on the jumbotron if you got something public. But in terms of like okay, um, uh, like I don't want to hold it to that because I don't know too much about your tech. But in general, okay, so we're operating. Let's say that transformers are the next big thing, right? And so you have these like companies that build their entire business model around this idea, which means that they spend like hundreds of millions of dollars, billions of dollars on GPUs and scale and so on, and they end up kind of creating this entire business around this idea that oh, we're not going to be disrupted, we're going to be the disruptors. But then comes a thing like, let's say, this is hypothetical now, but a new fundamental architecture that works better than transformers, right? Let's assume that's diffusion based or whatever, right? Um, that changes the rules of the game completely. And that is then you have the opportunity to build new businesses that don't operate with the same business models, that operate with like new assumptions completely, right?
yep, that
And
are more efficient, better than yours. You
yeah,
can't. Yeah,
and
you can never. You can't. One, you can't just. You have to like. That's what I mean by adapting. Like, yeah, right now, what I have, like, I don't. There's no one is doing anything close. So it seems like, oh yeah, I'm like Superwoman. Do I think that's gonna last very long? Probably not. And I'm not counting on that lasting very long at all. Even with the intellectual property protections that I do have, like, I'm not stupid. That's why I'm like very, very like keen to what is happening and what other technology is being developed that could become a better process. Like, you're right, and then I'd say the same thing is true with almost any other. I would think software is even more scary in terms of that. I think with hardware
Exactly.
does take a
Yeah.
lot longer.
Well, you would think so, but Salesforce.com still exists, which is the worst customer service, whatever they
They
produce in the
are the
entire
worst.
world.
They have
But
the
the
Far,
stinkiest
acceptance of the
like
rule.
Farrell, you
executives.
just mentioned something really interesting. And you know what? I forgot what I was going to say. Yeah, too bad.
I'll have a real quick aside here. Like this is the hardware person with patents saying that they're scared that that's not enough of a moat. And like
I mean, I
we were
would say
Now
hardware is
you know what
harder.
it's like to be a female founder.
well,
Serious, like,
and
because
yeah, like I guess like the direction I'm going there is like if with regard to the open source thing, like whether or not it's scary to open source your product, like I think it's more scary not to. Like if your moat is your code, like it's not a moat. Like GPT is going to write that very soon. So the advantage you get
Eh.
of open source, well, GPT may not, maybe a smart human is going to figure out how to write your same code. But if your
Look,
moat
like
is your code, the really like the advantage that you have, because if you're closed source, you're going to compete with like Microsoft and these other people who have billions and billions of dollars
yeah,
to.
but yikes! Look,
Mhm.
like OpenAI has had this like competitive advantage of GPT-4 architecture for the last year. No one's cracked it yet. Maybe some people who haven't announced
Yeah,
anything
I mean,
yet, but
even way
the
smaller companies. Yeah.
yeah, but I mean, do you think that OpenAI is operating on this? Like, even if they didn't open source GPT-4, do you think that they're operating with the sense that GPT-4 is their moat? I would say not, right?
No,
Because
absolutely not.
Right.
they
Absolutely
already
not.
have
Actually,
GPT-6, right?
to tie this
So
all,
yeah,
yeah, to tie this all together, like this is why like space is important because like this is kind of like how OpenAI was formed, right? It's like the moat becomes a true understanding of AI, so you know where the edge is and how to advance the state of the art. Once you have an organization like that, like OpenAI, the innovation, the minds that are there that really understand the technology and where to bring it to make new projects becomes the moat.
Exactly, which is why I think it's
Well,
so important to open source your stuff right now, because
yeah.
otherwise you're preventing the minds from accessing your product, and you can still monetize. There's nothing, allowing a self-hosting option doesn't, like the amount of customers you lose in exchange for having an engineering team that consists of the entire world. is like an easy trade-off, at least in my book. But
Yeah,
And
but
it's
at
a
that
very,
it's
point,
very
a
biased.
fine
when you reach the
balance.
singularity in a sense, right? Because at that point, what's the point of building a business? What's the point of writing a piece of software? You know, like it becomes like this like slippery slope into nihilism, right? Uh,
I mean, it's again. I would go back to what I said about customer value capture. I mean, that's
Yeah,
why
yeah.
the productization. I don't mean to do the VC thing and just go back to the money, but I think that's where your moat gets built. Is how many people are using your thing. Of course, they could all move off. Hey, my wife could stop using Instagram tomorrow, and she could use
Yeah.
whatever,
But
but
she
she's not
likely
going
won't.
to.
Yeah.
She's not going to
Yeah.
because just when I was working at a company in Japan that was they were like the Zynga of Japan. Our biggest thing was how do we get people to download our games, right? It's just because people don't want to download how do you get people to put your SDK into their game development cycle?
Please
It's
tell me
just
it wasn't Line. You weren't working for Line.
no, I didn't work for it. Was called Gree, Gree. You can see my LinkedIn profile. It's the same as my username. Anyways, I remember what I wanted to say to Farrell. You just came on something that was really interesting. If I put my private equity hat on, which is there's probably going to be a great secondary market for used GPUs in the future. Sorry, that's not too funny, but
Oh yeah, we were already talking about EAC, like potentially creating this business where I can source hardware obviously overseas and negotiate with vendors, and we can buy a bunch of GPUs, and then someone though wants to like, well, we should just lease them out to the EAC people, and then once the new models are in, then we could sell them and for a discount. And I'm just like, you guys, like we're supposed to be collaborating. Like I'm like, I'm happy to like try to source it for the group and negotiate like minimum order quantities and prices, so you guys aren't all going out and buying spending $30,000 on an H100, but because that's kind of what it's close to in terms of if you're buying one piece. But yeah, like I mean, to turn it into where we're like arbitraging off of the yak, like I don't want to do that.
Yeah,
I
so
mean, the number
yikes,
of
yikes. What were you saying about the how do you see the open source as because you kind of destroy your moat? I mean, let's just
I don't think you
let
do. I
yeah, well,
yeah.
you kind of do, but I want to hear
Okay.
what you think about that.
Well, so let's see. So the premise that I don't think is correct is that if someone else can copy my code, then my product is worthless. I don't think that's accurate. Like that's the natural thing is like, oh, somebody could just copy my thing and steal it and then launch the exact same thing. And that's true, and it might take them longer to do that if you're closed source, but they could do that anyway if they want to do it bad enough. So
But are
either
you equating that to like ML models? 'Cause I feel like that's maybe not too fair to like simplify like AI architectures that are proprietary as just like a moat of good code.
um well, I think that the like I agree. Like if it is just good code, then it's not a moat. But if you have a moat on top of good code that is an actual moat, then it's a moat. Um,
Yeah,
but
but in AI, you could be open sourcing just the weights, right? You don't
sure,
need to open source your code. You could be open sourcing your data set, right? You could be keeping it private, your training process,
sure.
which could have some proprietary like fine-tuning method or whatever, right?
Well, the
Um,
data sets won't mean anything anymore when we have synthetic data, which is probably coming down the
Well, no,
well,
pike in
we
the,
already
they
the
have
still
next
mean
synthetic data.
6 to 12 months.
no,
We,
like
we, we
real
already
data
have
still
synthetic
means.
data, right? The only difference is that how much seed data do you need to create synthetic data,
Well, and I
right?
guess like the when
I
I
think Tesla's probably got it if they can, how many different ways can you turn the handle on or turn the steering wheel, right?
Yeah,
No,
but
It's
but
there's
then how many different variables does the car have to deal with in its environment? Like I literally
it's
just
finite. It's finite. I mean,
no no
if you put me to
it's
work and you told me, David Branson Smith, you need to figure out, your only lot in life, and there's only one of you, but actually there's not just one of you. We can hire about 3,000 of you, Mechanical Turk style, and we've got to, I think Mechanical Turk's coming back in a big fucking way, pardon my French.
I disagree.
I used to work
And
for that.
The
It's
problem,
messy over there.
I know it is,
the
but well,
well,
you're benchmarking to the past. I think it's going to get better in the future. Hey, we're all EAC people, right? So we're go for the future. But
Somebody needs to build a better MTurk clone. Stanford was
well,
actually
that's
Well,
Scale
starting to do
AI.
well,
it.
yeah,
That's
Scale
Scale.ai.
AI. Yeah,
Okay.
Scale AI is like they're already $1 billion company now. They're already being used by like Ford and like biggest
Fuck yeah,
companies.
dude.
Yeah.
Well, there you go. I guess like for me, like with regards to the open source thing, like I don't think that, or at least to me, and it might just be like a case of like naivete or whatever, but like I don't, the amount of like go-to-market strategies that become invalid once you've open sourced like more or less your entire product, I don't think it's that many. Like I'm pretty sure if you have a good product and you are hosting it and making the UX super good and doing your marketing and trying to access your segments correctly, all the other things outside of just like writing code, I think your product still wins and your go-to-market
Well,
strategy is
like,
still
But
what
better.
examples
Okay,
would you
okay,
give
okay,
hold on,
okay.
that
I
guys.
that
have I have
support
I
that?
have
Because
one
I'm
thing
kind
to
of
say. Okay, I'm
okay.
sorry. I'll shut up, but I do have something to say against
Sure.
that.
I just wanted to know what products he like. What makes him think that? Like, what products have you seen that that have done that and
The one
survived that makes you
Yeah,
have that opinion?
the one that jumps to mind immediately for me is Obsidian, where they have a like they have a fantastic product. It's open source, it's completely hackable, and their whole community iterates on it constantly, which is part of the draw. And then what they sell on top of that is Obsidian Sync, which you can also self-host. But if you want to give them money, they will make it really, really easy for you to sync all of your notes between all of your devices. It's just sign in, log on, all good. If you want to self-host it, you kind of gotta set up the server and tweak with all the settings, etc. So you have to be kind of technical. But I think unless you are exclusively targeting extremely technical people that have no problem with like setting up something as self-hosted, I think you still got plenty of wiggle room to try and sell like a more
Okay, so
packaged
I
product.
do agree with
on
you.
the Obsidian thing.
Sure.
Okay, so Notion is something that we used to make fun of when I used to be a VC, and I still make fun of today. And sorry if anybody works at Notion. I mean, it's a wonderful product. They've done a great
No, but
job,
I'm
but
laughing because I'm thinking of Chris. Go ahead.
okay, sorry if I'm hurting any feelings, but I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to just say what I think. Um, uh, Microsoft basically just said, yeah, we can make that. And I mean, same thing with Slack, with Teams. I mean, so even if you don't open source it, I mean, I think a big thing that people need to really wrap their mind. And again, I'm not trying to, be mean to anybody who's speaking here. I really enjoy this conversation. So sorry if I come off a little brash, but I really don't
No,
mean it
you
to be
can
that
mean to
way.
Chris. I've enjoyed that actually. Continue.
But you know, technology is inherently deflationary. I mean, we're making things that people used to do with their hands easier to do, and the copying is going to be easier as well. I mean, if you pay me enough money, then I'm sure that I could. Um, maybe not full self-driving, but maybe not building a Tesla. Nora seems to be doing the hardware stuff, which it's got the word hard in it, so it's pretty freaking difficult. But some things are easier to replicate than others. So I guess I just don't this
Yeah.
line of thinking. I'm kind of,
I think we
unless you're
can.
unlocking something and you're really locking it down, sorry, with IP, with actual, and this is why patent lawyers exist, right? This is why Qualcomm and Apple have been entangled in this decades long dispute. Unless you're doing that, like, I just don't understand where you really extract the value of these things when you make them
Well,
open
that's the
source.
old mentality, man. Like that's the thing is that okay, let's get back to the basic assumption here, right? Is that there are no modes, right? Everything will be obsolete within 3 months. Okay.
Wait,
So
wait.
if that's the case, right, then like you need like if you're open sourcing something today, you're open sourcing it for many reasons, for like to build a community, to build like like to build an engine of innovation that can pump out new products, new research, right? And
Yeah.
you kind of like you have to think of it differently. Is that okay? If I'm open sourcing something today, it's not because I'm open sourcing my IP. No, I'm open sourcing uh, because I know that I already have the next thing, right? And we're already kind of working on the next thing. And open sourcing just solidifies this engine and makes it even more capable to actually get to this next thing. Right? The
Yeah.
next thing gets open source, you're already working on the thing after that, right? So it's this
Yeah, I
like
agree with
it's
you.
this machine,
If you
right? Like
can,
we're not talking about a typical like business model. Um,
but there's only a finite number of companies who can do, like Meta can do that right now. Meta can do that with the whatever
Llama.
they call it,
Llama.
Oculus or whatever they call that, right?
You mean Llama?
You know, when you own the platform, right, you can do that, right? You can make an app store, you can do something like that. But if like the Obsidian thing, to go back to that, that's what triggered me to jump back in and be very rude to interrupt everybody.
Wait, are
But
we sure that's open
um,
source? Because I just looked it up. It says Obsidian is not open source.
I,
well, okay, but Obsidian. I mean, listen. There's Rome. Why am I paying $15 a month for Rome? I'm actually about to cancel my subscription to them. Um, Obsidian, which
Cal.com.
is a
Let's say Cal.com, right? Like Calendly and Cal.com. Calendly is a billion-dollar company. Cal.com came in and did all its features and
what is
more.
Cal.com? What is Cal.com?
It's
Sorry.
an open source Calendly that you can run yourself or
I'm
you
gonna have
can
to
use their
try
service.
that.
Yeah, so like
Oh,
check
okay.
that out. It's like it's basically Calendly with more features, and they're
That's
open source.
awesome. I love it. I hate Calendly, so I'm into this.
there you go. The
I
other
mean,
well, yeah, you finish your thing. Sorry, I won't jump in.
no, go ahead. I was just gonna say like Calendly is a billion-dollar company, right? Like for a shitty piece of code, right?
Well,
God knows why.
exactly.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly. It is shitty.
so like I in googling it,
No,
like
no, no.
there's some debate.
They were valued as here's the thing. Here's the thing that everybody needs to get through their mind. They were valued as a billion-dollar company because didn't they get bought by somebody, or did they? They didn't IPO. They were bought
I
by
don't know,
Atlassian or
but
something like
even
that.
then, when was the valuation? Because let's not
Yeah. So
anyone who had a valuation that was done in like 2021,
yeah, it
like
doesn't make any
it
sense.
does
So
not mean anything right now.
Nora is completely right. Like just because they got what was it like? Oh Christ! I mean, you have WeWork, obviously, but we all, know there was another one that was
I'll
a
give a
lot of
good
these
example.
companies who went IPO, during the past couple of years. I mean, you have to know that, and this is the whole thing about VC. It's all about, like I said earlier on, you know, who are you going to exit to, and how are you going to IPO and extract all that money from mom and pop who are, their IRA, or whatever you call the retirement accounts, or something like that, who's investing in that, or getting in on the IPO or something like that. That doesn't mean that that's actually what the company is worth. They were just able to sell it at that point because everybody was living on zero interest rates, and
Yeah,
it's
100%.
Yeah,
complete
Let's say
bullshit.
it's
exactly. And
unrealized
just to
unrealized value, right?
We don't have to
Of
get into a
$2 billion.
tangent of like
no,
what is
but
the
can I just give
valuation?
one?
Yeah.
I just want to just give an example, just to give you guys an idea of
I'm about to
how
mute
bad.
everyone. I'm so sorry. It's because I do want to talk about products, but only like in the context of like kind of like where Martin was talking about. So like um, basically things that could be productized because it's the state of the art. And we can get into like, well, what's a moat, and like we can get into like what is the best strategy. And but there's lots of different strategies. It's like an ecosystem. You're building systems. It can't be like distilled down
Well,
to
Yeah.
something
I
too
just
short.
want to
Can I
kind
give
of
some
give.
input real quick? Because I was wanting to talk about like I've experienced proprietary AI stuff and open source AI stuff.
Mhm.
Like I think we have to keep in mind that like the commonality of something is not exactly the same as like the popularity. Like the most popular AI companies, for example, like there might be Meta or OpenAI or things like that. Like they might have pretty general use cases, but then there's a lot of different kind of smaller businesses that are not as popular, but maybe arguably even make up like most AI businesses that are relatively niche use cases, like AI specifically for analyzing electron spectrograms or something like that. Or in my case, I was working for pretty much 4 years on audio-based AI that could replicate certain voices, but specifically optimized to have as low latency as possible and within like less than an hour of the person's voice.
Mhm.
And with those types of relatively niche constraints, Like we were able to have, do the research on that architecture, pretty much hold that moat for like years. Like I would say it's still pretty state of the art, and then pretty much advertise it to stuff like Twitch streamers that need super low latency voice replication and things like that. And so then on the flip side, I have released open source stuff, but then that's the much more general stuff, like just LLMs that people can chat with for pretty much any use case. Then I open source all of that work. So I think those types of things are things to keep in mind. And even when it comes to the proprietary AI that I worked on, though, it still was a lot of the moat was the product part, was making it a really
But
nice
that use
interface
case is
that
so
was.
substantially like significant that like the low latency, like that's
Mhm.
the product itself was like is so like marketable.
Or and I
Yeah,
But at the end of the day, you still need a highly competent model at the back, right? Because yeah, sure, you can have all the low latency you want, and those are great value propositions. But okay, let's say right now all AI products are converging towards the same exact like formats, right? So if it's if it's text based, it's a chat interface. If it's image based, there like you can see the UI UX is pretty much the same across all of these, and they're all converging towards similar interfaces. Audio, same idea, right? So
down with the
like
chatbot meta. I just have to say
I would
that.
disagree that it's converging all to
uh,
that. But
please make the case that it's not, because that's what I'm feeling is happening, is that
So
like
I
all
mean,
these
because
interfaces are
here,
in
becoming
terms,
basically one, right?
I'll give an example. So in this use case, for example, like it doesn't make sense for it to be a chat interface in the sense of, or I guess I don't know, in some sense you could maybe call this chat, but for what we're using this low latency AI for, the streamer pretty much pays and licenses for their voice to be replicated with this very low latency TTS, and then somebody can donate or whatever through to the stream. It automatically says thank you, blah blah blah, for donating. It reads out the person's name. This all happens automatically in the back end, and there's not really like a purpose for
yeah, but that
like.
also feels like a
Yeah.
business to business case versus the business to consumer. If when
Oh
you're
no,
going
yeah, it
consumer
is.
facing, you're probably going to
It
have
is
it.
very much a
Well,
B2B thing. But I would say maybe even like this is again where I was talking about the popularity of something versus what most businesses actually are. I would say probably maybe even most businesses actually doing proprietary AI stuff are possibly even like mostly B2B businesses as opposed to B2C.
I think
Yeah,
that's
okay.
one
So
of the.
putting aside the business model, right? Like the convergence of the UI UX is like it is happening, right? Like it's not maybe if you're comparing apples to oranges, it's not, right? But like it is happening in
Or
general
apples to
across all of
Android.
these different products. At the end of the day, what matters is the models that power these interfaces, especially as we know that all of these interfaces, all code will become uh, basically anyone can come up with any
Maybe
code.
when you
Any
direct.
I wonder if I'm cutting out here. Maybe. Yeah.
the interface, and so like that's really the only kind of moat that OpenAI has in this sense. Sure, like you can argue distribution, marketing, and so on, but you know what? Like if I come up with a better model tomorrow and that doesn't have all the bullshit that we deal with GPT-4, well, guess what? The interface is going to be pretty much the same, right? And like a lot more people will want to use it than if I just came up with a equivalent quality model with the same interface, right? So like the disruption can happen. It's just a matter of the actual underlying technology that powers this product, right? Which goes back to the conversation we had earlier, which is that research is probably like research and pumping out these new innovations is probably the most important thing in these business models right now. And it does like throw in the question of okay, how can you open source something while keeping this like competitive advantage to build a business around it?
Okay, I'm gonna try to thread the needle between research and product very finely here. Farrell, you just mentioned something that I think is really interesting. So um, let's take the research and let's focus it on, for example, marketing. I think a lot of people come to sorry, Chat GPT, and sorry, I had one too many beers last night, and they have no idea what to do with it. I mean, this is my mom. This is most of the people in an office. If I went to, I'm unemployed right now, but um, and if you got one for marketing, there should be one for sales, there should be one for windshields, there should be one for growing pumpkins. I'm just looking
I
around.
see. Yeah,
There's still
I'm with
pumpkins.
Farrell in terms of thumbs down because I feel like that's what was happening. It was just every fucking AI project was just a GPT wrapper.
Well, that's where I feel like it's like again, like maybe that's what is most popular in terms of the public eye, but when it comes to what most businesses are actually doing, a lot of it is
So I might need to refresh.
Whatever we have now, chat interface is like, okay, like put that aside, right? Like, what's the next interface? And next
So I
interface
might
is
need to
an
refresh.
AI model that can do any to any, which includes rendering whatever graphical interface.
Oh my god, what is going on here? Okay.
agree to that interface is no longer remote. But until then, I
But,
think
but
these
until then,
custom
when? But that's the thing is that if you want to build a business today around AI, build a product around AI, you need to be looking ahead in the next.
Bro, what the fuck?
Now, this is not like some sci-fi shit in the next 5 years, right? Like 5 years is our AGI timeline,
Well,
right?
yeah, okay, but like right now
I
we're barely at the point of like I do agree, like I'm a very, this acceleration is just like you, like I'm very optimistic of where things will be, but even things like actually having just even like an intern level engineer, it's something we're just barely able to do in like not really a polished way yet, and
Okay,
we're very, very close to that. But yeah, I mean, I think it's a bit silly to say that like interface an entire like stack of a software is like not
l-
at all.
let me
Yeah.
give you a very, very boring use case that I sold upwards of $6.5 million ARR, and I'm not just tooting my own horn or anything like that. I mean, it's real world knowledge. So I'm just gonna let you know. LDJ, before you got in there, before you came into this space, and before a bunch of people came in, I mentioned that I had worked for one of the original LLM models before LLM was ever a name, before transformers were even a thing, and the biggest thing that I did is I sold to manufacturing companies in Japan, and they trained. So the pre-training was already done, and the fine tuning was done on their maintenance notes. So they had, like 40 years of maintenance notes about how to fix, machine A, and how to figure out, like, if this breaks, what was the root cause of X breaking? It was, um, component Z down the line or something like that. So I think it's really basic. A lot of people like to use this word, basic bitch shit. And I think that's where a lot of the value lies. But if
I
I'm
love that you said that because I use that all the time.
sorry, I don't like to swear, but I do too often. Does that
It's
make
just a
sense,
great.
LDJ?
It's
Like,
just
am
a
I?
great concept. Well,
That
now we
makes
can use
sense,
it to
but
call
the
something mid. It's so mid. So there you go.
I don't like mid. Mid is one that I refuse to use. Brandon, what were you going to say? Sorry.
let's see, I kind of forget. Oh, I was gonna say, well, the cats I mean, the cat's kind of out of the bag. Like, there was a huge period of like nothing really happening that much, but now we know that AI can
I
solve
lost
basically
my
any problem.
opportunity. Rip.
It's just a matter
That's
of
how it
finding
goes.
more efficient ways of doing it.
Sorry, David, I
Well,
was responding to your thing earlier, but I was
oh, go
muted.
ahead. No, it's okay.
Oh, nice. What's
Yeah,
up, two
but
people? How
and
you
I
doing?
guess this is kind of a response to you and Farrell. Like, I would say even if the interface thing is a moat, I would say like obviously I think most people would agree like the audience to a large degree is a moat. Like we literally have Claude that is pretty much like they kind of nerfed it now from what I've heard, but you know on first release Claude 2 was like around pretty much the benchmark scores of GPT-4 while having way longer context. But even the model being like significantly better, at least in that dimension,
All right.
like that
Well,
is not enough
well,
to get people
I
going
can't get
from
back on.
ChatGPT
I'm
to Claude
gonna
2. And it's not like
start up
Claude
my
2
video
necessarily
games
has a way
randomly.
worse interface either. Like it's still pretty much a clone of ChatGPT. So then the question is, why are people not moving to Claude? And it's because people are just, even just the habit of people being used to going to chatgpt.com or OpenAI, you know, .chatgpt or whatever the URL is, like that habit and that audience itself is kind of like a moat and that momentum that you already have. Does that kind of
Sure,
make
sure,
sense?
LDJ, I
Yeah.
agree 100% with you, except for one thing, is that I stopped using Google. Okay. And the fact that I stopped using Google after decades of using Google, it is the best example for how
hmm
a name brand can be disrupted overnight.
I
Right?
agree, but that's
No,
because
it
th-
can't because I
um
mean it's like
okay.
tissue, right? Like, what does everybody call a rollerblade? I mean, Google means search. It's
Yeah,
already in the
I still
lexicon.
always
It's too
Google,
late.
Wait, but like Google
I
is
still say
really bad
Googling,
compared
right?
to the other
But I
options.
don't use Google, right? Like when
Yeah.
someone asks me, a question about whatever, I say Google it, right? But I don't mean Google, right? Because I wouldn't use Google anymore. Like
Yeah,
Google
yeah,
is a
but like
bad shit show,
but
to be honest.
but Farrell, the reason why you do that, and like correct me if I'm wrong, but it's because now there's things available
Oh,
that
Rip,
are
I
like
lost
way
somebody.
better interface and way better model in the back end.
Exactly, exactly. So
Exactly, yeah.
Cloud
So
2 cannot pull users from ChatGPT because their experience and their value propositions are not like superior to ChatGPT enough to actually warrant a user to switch from Claude to GPT, from
y-
GPT to Claude,
yeah,
right?
yeah. I
But
get that,
if
if
tomorrow Claude came
mhm,
like Anthropic came up with a like a totally new interface, right? With like text to speech, images, whatever, no chat interface, like something we can't even or some of us like can picture it, but like like something new, right? And doesn't have the moderation problems, is super aligned, it does
mhm.
what you ask it to do, it doesn't tell you, it's not lazy when you ask it something. I I bet you people would move. Like
They
I
won't
Yeah,
would
move to
I would
but
anything named they won't move to anything named Claude. I mean,
well, okay, look,
honestly,
here's a
I'm
really
sorry, it
Sure.
sounds
okay.
stupid, but I mean, at least Grok is a little bit closer to. I mean, you people are
Okay.
stupid and they make decisions based on what sounds cool. Google sounded pretty freaking cool. Bing sounds really stupid. Sorry.
Yeah,
Uh,
okay. Well,
you
when
know,
it comes to like Farrell, and sorry to cut you off real quick, but I just wanna before I forget, the thing about Google, like the really interesting thing about that analogy though, I understand you switch away from Google, but like I even me consciously wanting to switch from Google, like I'm having difficulty getting out of the habit of like, typing in google.com. And then like a really surprising statistic though that I think a lot of people don't know is even before Bing started integrating like GPT-4 and all of that, like even when Bing was trash, which was, most of the past 10 years, or, me and you would probably agree it was fairly trash. Like even then, I think the statistic was roughly like 30 or maybe even like 40% of people or something around there, like were using Bing for the past 10 years. And that's because there's already a moat from even like over a decade ago of Bing still has that momentum of even when they're really bad, even when there's Google and all these way better things, like a huge portion of the population still using Bing when it was really
Uh,
bad just because of that momentum that they
That's
had.
the thing. It's
I think
hard to.
a lot of the Bing stuff is just from the fact that Windows the default
Yeah, yeah,
browser
it's
is
like
Edge
default
and
in
Edge the
Windows.
default
Yeah,
thing is
yeah.
with Bing, and then you also have that like DuckDuckGo, the
no,
backend actually
ChatGPT
uses
did
Bing.
a great job in terms of branding. It's kind of ridiculous to think about how it propagated since November, about a year ago, right?
hmm Almost
And
exactly a
more
year ago.
Yeah,
I
exactly
want
a
to
year
say a
ago, but
year
then
ago
it
in like
really started to pick up
minus
steam
3
about
days.
January, February of this year. And it's kind of like the Google of, but again, still people like my mom, 56 years old, she still doesn't know how to use it, even though it's an app
Most
and,
people
you know,
don't
it's
know how
right
to use
there.
it,
Right. And so,
or just don't
uh,
use it.
people are still Googling everything. So there's still that, it's weird, you know, people will just default to what they, because again, it's like the tissue, right? Like Kleenex, right? That's the thing, you know, grab a Kleenex. You know,
Yeah.
it's not a Kleenex. It's actually a piece of tissue paper, but we call it a Kleenex because, you know, they really nailed it with that one, and they got ahead of the curve, and then everybody started using it. So unfortunately, you know, once you start fast and you know, kind of get that mind share, then that's all you need. But
There's actually a
anyways,
name for that. There's a, I forgot what the exact term is, but there's
yeah,
like a
me too. It's
term
like
that there's a term
marketing
for like when you
terminology. Yeah.
have, yeah, like when you have something that like everybody calls napkins or whatever Kleenex, even though it's not a Kleenex. Or you know how the iPhone, they purposely make the iPhone interface
Rollerblade.
Yeah, but
look like a really
the
old like
analogy doesn't
phone
really
dialing.
apply. The
Or
analogy doesn't really apply
Wait, why is
because
that? Everyone keeps interrupting each other. It's hard to
yeah,
follow.
go ahead. The
the
person
analogy
that, yeah, go
between
ahead.
Kleenex and Google doesn't apply because your nose is still going to itch. You're still going to have snot in it. You know, your nose is not going anywhere, and it's going to need to be clean. So tissues as a service as a product is not going anywhere. However, search is dead.
Tissues as a service.
It just
True.
doesn't know it yet.
Wait, I
You know,
wouldn't
you're
say.
not. I have not searched for
Okay.
anything in months. I go into Claude or Google, excuse me, ChatGPT. I say what it is that's on my mind and what I'm thinking about, and they help orient me towards the right answer. If I don't get exactly what I need there, or I don't have confidence in the reply, then maybe I'll touch a search engine. But search itself is a dead paradigm.
I mean,
It's
Well,
not going
then
to
when you
exist in a
come
year.
over to my mom's house and then teach her how to use it, please.
But when you say like nose is itchy and your nose is always going to be itchy, I would say the same thing for people always want to find out stuff. Like, so that would be the more equal equivalent of like your nose is always itchy. But then the problem is,
Yeah,
like,
you're
what do
going to
you
go
use
to
as
the
the
best
solution
way
for
to
your nose
find
being itchy, or
things,
what do you use as a
which is
solution
going
for?
into an AI to tell you the things that you
Yeah,
want to know and find. It's not going to be searching for it yourself, which is significantly higher entropy work than going to a reduced entropy source like an AI
Yeah,
has
my
the
mom doesn't know the
capacity
word
to bring
entropy,
it
so
all
you're
together.
losing mind share as you speak.
yeah,
Sorry.
yeah.
It doesn't
But I
doesn't
think the
matter.
main thing is
I mean,
like
you could just
it's.
stay more organized. You don't have to all talk about things like EAC people all the time, guys.
Yeah, I mean, like, I do still honestly prefer, like, Google for certain things more than ChatGPT, where, like, I mean, it's not even until super recently that ChatGPT even has updated its latest information, and then even when you're using the browsing function, it does that little browsing thing, and, like, could take, like, a whole 10 seconds or more to even find the thing and then give you an answer. But, I mean, while we're on this little note real quick, I'm just wondering if anybody has, like, their own new preferred, like, AI search method, because I've been really enjoying Perplexity, and I don't know if anybody has, like, a better thing that they might recommend, or
Perplexity is great because it provides the citations and
it's instant, like way faster than ChatGPT browsing.
yeah, and it supposedly solves hallucinations, but I'm not sure about that.
I think it's probably better at hallucinations than ChatGPT browsing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
What's it
I
called?
use
What's
after
it
everyone
called?
else
Perplexity.
answers, I actually wanted
Perplexity.
LDJ to go back
For
to what
people
he's
who can
saying
hear
about
me,
why
which
Apple
is one
designs
person.
something a certain way.
Oh yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Sorry, I'll wrap up on that
Perplexity.ai.
point. Yeah, the URL is perplexity.ai, and then to wrap up that point, Nora, that you're talking about, I was going to say, so iPhone, if you go into the dialing app, and this has been the same since like the first iPhone, they purposely, like, when you click on the different buttons in the dialing, when you're dialing a phone number, it makes a phone, it makes the sound effect as if you're dialing like a 1990s phone or something, because that's what people are used to.
Talking about
And then
skeuomorphism.
even the phone icon in your phone, it looks like an old like 90s phone that you would have like attached to the wall.
You're looking
That's
for the
right.
term, right?
What do you say?
This skeuomorphism.
Oh yeah, that might be one of the terms. Yeah, skeuomorphism. Is that like when you're referencing like an old object or something
Assume
like,
more
Yeah, like a
weird thing for
floppy
it's
people to
disk.
be
like
saying.
it's a
They're
design thing. It's like when usually related to UI. It's like when you make the UI look like it's a real thing, like real rendering.
yeah, but
Like
Yeah, but the fact that it mimics is something older rather than trying to like have a new sound is his point. Like, because like, well, what
yeah,
I'm saying is, that you often get told like your product, you might think that like it's fantastic and super innovative, but nobody wants it. Like if you're making something and nobody wants it and they're comfortable and happy doing using whatever they're using, like then you're not going to have widespread adoption, and that's what's really going to drive
Nora, you
anything.
should know this. You got to make them want it.
Well, I mean, I guess so. We can try to market it, but the thing that people don't realize is that unless you're giving them some kind of value proposition of why they should want to, which is, showing them how it's really easy to use ChatGPT and it's way, way, way better than Google, then they're not going to switch over. People don't like change.
I
People
just wanted
like
to.
consistency. So, like, you might think like, oh, I want this future thing, but unless it's making their life easier with less work for them to like make that shift, they're not going to want to do it. No one wants to have to learn new shit and like learn how to do something new. Like people are very resistant to change.
Okay, this opens up a really interesting conversation. So, is Google at this point just good enough for people to continue to use it, whereas ChatGPT is going to give them better answers? However, the switching costs are too high,
Well,
even though the
you have your
switching costs
answer.
really aren't there.
You
But
already have
is
your answer.
Google still just good enough? Like, is it okay to be 80%? And then, why is my mom going to want to, switch over to something new when she's just used to, using Google?
well, I would argue
Billions
to.
of people still use Google.
Yeah, go on, Farrell. I'll go after you.
100 plus million use ChatGPT, and maybe like a few hundred mil in the extended AI API and all that shit. So we're super early, right? It doesn't mean that
But it is so good.
and that means what?
Oh
Like
my
it
god,
doesn't mean that
no.
search and Google search and all that stuff is going to last, because that says nothing about this. It's just that most people are like not willing to switch because they're lazy, right? But also what that means is that whatever interfaces that we have right now, whatever user experiences, whatever products that you're seeing, have not even hit the point of like adoption that you can say that these are like winning interfaces. They're just winning
100%.
interfaces today,
Right,
right?
but it doesn't mean that
And
they're not going to be adopted. Of course, they're going to be
they
adopted.
No,
will
Well,
be
and
well, well,
adopted.
well,
the
100%
well.
thing
Let
they
is,
will
me,
be
let me,
they're
adopted.
let me.
not.
But that also means that the experience itself will will only become even better, and will reduce these switching costs, and will enable people to adopt it at such scale that overnight, like Google could become like uh, it could go the way of the dodo, right? Just because of the exponential improvement we're going to witness in the actual like technology, like the underlying models, but also the interfaces that deliver these models, which will eventually converge to this like general assistant that can do everything.
And the thing is that a lot of times with traction, it does happen a lot sometimes like all at once. Like especially when you have exactly what you're talking about.
You're cutting
You
out
know,
from me, Nora. You're probably cutting out for
oh,
You're
others.
cutting out because we're adding more
is that
speakers.
better?
And sorry, I had to mute everyone because we were talking over each other. So sorry about that.
Thank you actually for doing that. But like you know, some feature or some interface that it makes it easier to and will somehow like push more widespread adoption, like or trigger more widespread adoption. The FOMO tends to like get people to like adopt all at once. So like this can happen like overnight. Like it could be like where Google has a very like comfortable position, and then within a couple of like months, like and that's using generous. That then like no, everyone's using ChatGPT because all of a sudden they added some feature or they made it some way where everyone was like, hey, like have you used ChatGPT? And everyone starts talking about it, and like overnight it becomes the norm. Like think about how quickly that was the case for everything that we do constantly use. With respect to like even Google, like Ask Jeeves was like this big thing for a while, and then you know what I mean. And then like overnight it seems like nope, Google took over. It's not like Ask Jeeves like kept its moat for a very long time or for its dominant position. I think that people tend to, once they see other people adopting it, like it happens very quickly when it does happen. It snowballs. Is like
Okay.
what it is.
Yeah,
So
you
what I
can-
would say against that, and I guess I'm just playing devil's advocate a little bit right now. And if I go through a little bit of a dead zone, I'm sorry, but I would say that when Google came to prominence, they created a market. What it seems like ChatGPT no pun intended, is searching for right now is to replace search. Well, when Google came about, search wasn't a thing. I mean, yeah, of course, you had a couple of different ones.
I
You
mean,
had the
you had
Yahoos, you had
Yahoo.
the
It was. I
Ask
feel like it was
Jeeves,
a
you had the
market.
site and stuff like that, but they really didn't get it. But if ChatGPT doesn't open up something that's completely brand new, then they're never going to do a Google. And here's an example. A lot of people talked about how Microsoft was going to go by the wayside because Google's here, but they haven't, and it's because they've got distribution. And I can absolutely guarantee you that Google has done similar distribution networking to the point that there are multi-million-dollar contracts with everybody in the world that Google is providing them with some, it can be Drive, it can be, whatever
Yeah,
they've
but
got.
David, that operates within the current context and current assumptions,
That's what I'm
right?
saying.
You
That's what
can't
I'm
forget
agreeing with
that
you.
though.
I'm agreeing with you. So that's why ChatGPT needs to do something that is similarly different from the current paradigm in order to break out and be a big company. Otherwise, and don't look at the $9 billion valuation that they have. We can get back to the valuation of the VC stories again, because I tell you that the valuation they have right
Yeah,
now is not going to
I
be
don't think we
something that's going to
disagree
be
with you
sustained.
there, but we kind of need to let I think Toby wanted to speak for a while. Sorry, I had to mute everyone again, but it's like someone was cutting out, and then I had to remove someone else as a speaker because their mic was making sounds. But I just want to remind everyone that we kind of want to make it a little bit more tech focused. I think Toby was trying to say something earlier, and then we could go to ALBS to say something. But David, I think your point was around we were talking about Google and how ChatGPT might replace Google. These are all kind of speculative points, and it could go either way. And but let's hear from Toby here, if you wanted to speak. Okay, Toby might not be able to speak. Maybe we could do hand raising things. LDJ can speak or whatever. If you're a speaker, you can just raise your hand, and then we can kind of time share a little bit better. And I'll unmute everyone.
Hi, okay. By the way, you might notice that I was using the wave hand emoji. For some reason on desktop, there's only the waving hand emoji and not the raising hand, the regular one. So
Okay.
yeah, just know, yeah, the waving is that. So what I was gonna say is we were kind of talking for a while on a tangent about Google's dead, there's things better than Google, people not switching from Google. But I think if we're all being honest with ourselves, sure, there's a chance that Google might truly just die out like Yahoo.
This is me.
If you're part of the beta program when you Google something now, and that's only going to get faster, better. It's already pretty good, and I've been using it a decent amount. And I think they're just going to adapt, and people are going to keep using Google, and Google's going to get better in a way where the gap between the best thing from Google and ChatGPT is not going to be that big, and people are just going to kind of use those tools for different things. And
yeah, I agree. I don't agree that everyone's kind of crapping on Google, they're falling behind. I think they know what they're doing. They kind of invented the transformer. They could easily they're just a little bit behind in terms of compute and some researchers, but I mean, they don't need to be they're just raking in the money from advertising. They don't need to have a chatbot right now. Anyway,
that's
sorry,
a really good point. They literally made transformers. Yeah.
And ALBS, you can speak if you want.
Yeah, and there's also just the element that we're kind of behind the veil of teapot, to say the least. We're living in a slightly different world than everyone else that's not on Twitter, to be frank, because they're way further behind in terms of the tools that they're using. Just because
We're
we
early
see,
adopters, yeah.
yeah, we're the earliest of the earliest adopters. And then to clarify on Google being behind. I don't think they're behind on tech or compute. I think they're just behind in product, because we're talking about search, like, and it's like specifically that. So it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't have the stuff. They've been known to sit on innovative tech for quite some time. So this is just a matter of, like, in my opinion, them
Yeah,
buying time until they know how to put out the next product that's going to knock everyone's socks off, right? Like,
Yeah,
yeah,
by the time they launch that product, there will be like fundamental shifts again in the technology and in how you serve that technology and so on that will kind of keep them pushing their, their timelines
but
until,
but
you
but
know.
isn't that more reason to take a little bit more time to figure? Like, let's use Apple as an example. Like, when Apple comes late to every game, right? Late to the phone, late to the laptop, late to the
yeah.
VR.
Apple
They're
for
late to
sure is
every
gonna.
game, but when they come, they make sure they kill it, right? And I don't know if Google's gonna do that, but maybe.
Well, Apple has a whole ecosystem behind them, so for them, they have like a cult-like following. So I think it's easier for them to kind of delay the whole innovative process because they already know that they have an incredible backing behind them because of their
Yeah, yeah.
ecosystem.
Look, guys, like Google has spent a lot of like has contributed so much to AI, right? Let's just make sure to like give them credit where credit is due because they like a lot of what we are building up on top of is was research as well on, in their labs. So let's just get that out of the way, okay? That doesn't mean that they will be able to productize them and find the gems that are needed inside of that research to actually like get something out that is super valuable because they have a lot of uh, like the way that their organization is set up is not necessarily incentivized to actually um, push for these innovations and release them and publish them. And they have a lot of bottlenecks within their organization that prevents them from doing so. So like I just like honestly like let's just move away from that. Let's dial it back to technology because I think now we're just getting lost in this idea of how to go to market and so on, which is just like a never-ending discussion, right?
Yep, fair enough.
Topi's just muted himself because he's like, oh, I had a point about the Google thing.
Hello? Can y'all hear me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Oh
Yep.
my god, thank god, my mic was spazzing out. I had a few things, I was like trying to see if the purple thing would show up, but you know, Spaces takes 10 seconds to update who's speaking. Um, so I think Nora is 100% right in that you have this like network effect with adoption rates. So as you get some people start to use it, more people in their peripheral in the life will see that they're using it, and if they really really like it, and these like chatbots start to get better and better, more people are going to recommend it to their friends, and you're going to get this word of mouth, and you're going to get this S curve adoption. I also think like it's kind of I sort of looked at sort of what are the different domains that I think are going to be big with AI, and I sort of narrowed it down to like three different styles. So the first one is the chatbot interface, which is like the ChatGPT. These are very generalist. You kind of go with like almost like Fiverr style requests where maybe you wanted to create you images or like recipes. Then you have like different like on-demand interfaces, which is kind of what we were talking about earlier with the text-to-speech APIs, or maybe like a dynamic fill in Photoshop. And then the third, which I think is not as capitalized today, and is really gonna blow up as these uh, capabilities improve, is the Copilot interface. Microsoft's been trying to push that a lot, where it kind of oversees what you're doing and like suggests different ideas. But it's always going to be that the chatbot's going to be the most popular because the on-demand interfaces and the Copilot interfaces, they're very like more niche and more narrowed, and so you're not going to have this like mass appeal versus with the chatbot unless you get some very broad generalist Copilots, because Microsoft's trying to do that in Windows wide, but I don't know how successful they're going to be.
I actually think the future might be, and I think we were alluding to this before. I didn't know exactly what you guys were arguing about. I say arguing in like the best way, not no negative connotation. LDJ and far L. I think you're talking about like divergence of UI versus convergence. But I do think that like audio chatbots will be the future. We just don't have enough data where the text isn't the interface; it's just voice, which captures a lot more contextual information.
Oh, but by the way, just want to say that like LDJ and I like by no means are arguing in any aggressive way. Like we love to
Yeah,
have
that's
these
what I was trying to
back and
get away
forth.
from. I'm like, it's not the right word, but like in a sense, arguing is not necessarily a bad thing.
I would one up you and say that it's not even just voice, but more like a FaceTime interface, where you
Yeah,
actually get video and you get the facial expressions too.
yeah. Video will probably
Can
come
I
after.
can I push back on that one just real quick?
Push
Just
back
for
on
fun, just to be a devil's advocate. You all remember when Amazon released and again, I know, this is pre-ChatGPT and stuff like that, but remember when they released that home device that you had to interact with it just via audio, and people got really upset with it? There needs to be a textual interface to this. I actually really believe this. I think that people
Well,
there
the
needs
thing
to
is,
be a redundant aspect to it. There needs to be something where people can override it with being able to give it like commands via text, because if you don't, then people get very, very upset with text very quickly unless it's extremely perfect. And even just us talking here, right, like speaking to another person, I mean, this isn't how computing happens. Compute happens by being able to dictate commands via static element. And so when things can get garbled and misunderstood
yeah.
via
To be
your
clear,
voice,
I'm
people
not
don't want to
talking
do
about.
that.
Yeah, to be clear, I'm not. Don't mean to interrupt. It's just for me, it sounded like a good time to like interject. But like, I think there's like a little bit of confusion because I'm not talking about like the Siri style. Like, oh, you change your voice into text, and then it like that was even before LLMs. Like those were really garbage. I'm talking about like natural, actual end-to-end like voice, but they understand the context of everything, of every space, of every intonation, and it's answered with proper intonation, with that carries real information rather than the simulated one
And
that's out there.
I would also push back on specifically the like when you're talking about the precision of text. I think if you're doing like programming, I would hate to program over talking to a computer, but I think if it's a lot more like conversationalist, which is what the like broader appeal will be, that you actually do want the voice, that the text loses something. And I think it was Brandon was saying earlier how you actually are carrying more information about the way that you say certain things, or like the speech patterns that you're employing, and you can pick up more than just what was said because there's more context around it.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I just think that thinking about like that movie Her, um, it's getting to that point. Like that movie's a really big misnomer, if that's the right word that I'm using. Because everything was perfect. Like, Joaquin Phoenix was able to speak to this girl, Scarlett Johansson or whatever whatever it was, and everything came back kind of perfect. But that was in the context of a movie. Not saying that you mentioned that. I'm the one who mentioned it. But when you really need to get something done at a business level, for example. When you're having to continuously go back and say, no, I didn't mean that. You can get stuff done a lot faster when you're actually coding it into like actual, rules,
Yeah, this is what.
rather than having to argue with somebody who's like, oh, I didn't understand that, David. I'm so sorry. So
Yeah,
that's
this
why
is
I don't
what.
see that as the be all end all. Sorry, Brandon. Last thing. That's why I don't see that as the be all end all interface.
This is what Martin Shkreli was talking about when he's like, oh, we're still doing research on like the exact way because like David, have you tried? And I want to get John to speak next, and then someone else had their hand up. But David, have you tried a GPT-4 with voice yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, well that's a good because like you mentioned Her. I mean, it's basically 80% of the way there. The only thing is it doesn't have the. It does use intonation very well, and it does pick up what you're saying very well, but it doesn't do it perfectly. It's more simulated based on text.
So,
But it's 80% of the way there essentially. Outside of the context window, maybe not. But sorry, John. Go ahead.
but just before we get off the topic of speech, though, because I think speech is something like we're debating speech, but it's not actually about speech. It's about like how much trust do you have in the system behind it, right? And I think that trust on speech is going to be built very similarly to how people just build trust. Like when you just first meet someone, let's say you get a new engineer on your team, like you're probably going to be a lot more micromanaging, super descriptive of what you want this person to do, like really drilling into that because you don't know, like they haven't come through for you or whatever. But as sort of like the systems build trust, or you build trust with the systems in their ability, then it's like you naturally trust speech more, even though it has nothing to do with speech. Like when we talk about speech, it's like, what's the latency? How real does it sound? This is like the two dimensions that you can evaluate speech on. The rest is like how good are the systems behind it, right?
Well, I'm not worried. I'm not too worried about trust. I guess I'm worried about, does it get the job done?
That's what I
And
mean by trust, though. Like you
Right.
trust in its ability.
well, okay.
And there's a
All
big
right.
difference
Now
between
I understand.
there's a big
I know a
difference
couple
between
people
just
have
being
their
able
hands
to
up.
provide
Sorry to interrupt.
information and
I have to
actually
mute
doing
everyone.
tasks.
Sorry, I had to mute everyone. So like, if you want to put up your hand, like I'll kind of respect that a little bit first. Not that you necessarily have to put up your hand. It's just so everyone can get a chance to speak. So sorry about that, and I'll let John speak if he has anything to say.
Appreciate it. Yeah, I heard somebody say a little bit earlier that talking is not the ideal way to program, which is definitely what my intuition would have been a while back. But like the last few years, I've done a ton of coding, and I've done a ton of also leading engineers and mentoring engineers and bringing them onto teams. And I feel like for some engineers, not everybody you hire, but some people, you invest a few months into them, kind of like bring them onto the team. You build up some standard materials, but mostly you're really tuning that person to how you like to work and how your company likes to work. And I feel like my productivity that I can achieve by having a quick conversation with an engineer that's been working with me for a long time, it's a massive, massive source of leverage. Like I think that's a much better way for me to program than coding myself. And that's what I do mostly these days is delegate to other people. And I think it actually works great. I think that the opportunity with AI really here is to get rid of those negative outcomes where you bring somebody on and they're just not really a good fit. And also the fact that you have to invest so much into every single engineer that you bring on. The cool part about AI is that you can build up a corpus of knowledge and data such that you don't have to do all of this incremental work for every single unit of AI help that you bring on for programming. I think very quickly it's going to become the case that you can get that same level of delegation that you would get from an engineer that's really well tuned to you as a person or your company, that's been working with you for 6 months or a year or multiple years, in like minutes from an AI. So actually, I'm pretty bullish on AI for programming with voice.
Yeah, I agree. It's like the longer you like, I like how you use like tuning, like you're fine tuning an employee, but like yeah, the longer you speak with a computer, a transformer, whatever the architecture is going to be in the future, it needs to like learn your embeddings, like more advanced context for what you actually mean. So at the end of the day, you can just say like one word and it knows what to do because it has that inherent meaning. And this goes back to like the limitations of transformers we were talking about. It can't just all be fitting into a context block. It can't just be stuffing things in there. It needs like a rethinking, maybe like constant online tuning. Yeah, LDJ. And someone else had their hand up, and I'm just thinking who that was. You can't put your hand up, but LDJ can now do it, so that's cool. LDJ was first, so.
Yeah, so I did like accidentally drop out of the space for a little bit, but somebody was talking about her being a misnomer, and then like you guys were talking about speech a little bit, and it cut out. Like if anybody could just quickly summarize like what was kind of the thing wrong about her,
Yeah.
the movie that you guys were talking about.
Oh, I think David was like criticizing her, and then I was like, "Oh, have you tried a GPT for voice?" And then he said no.
Like what was the criticism? Like was it that like that wouldn't be possible, or like what was it?
Yeah, he was kind of getting at that, and then I was like, "Well, I think it's like 80% of the way there already with GPT-4 with voice. It's just the context length and like long, and then also the models are just converting text to speech and back and forth. They're not actually communicating natively in like spoken language, like in waveform, which is possible to do for transformers, like with jukebox, like they use autoencoders to like
Yeah.
to make tokens and stuff. Sorry, either Roman or David. Maybe Roman because he hasn't spoken yet, and then David. And then LDJ, if you want to finish your point as well.
Oh yeah, I'll just respond to you real quick. Yeah, like I personally use the ChatGPT with voice, and yeah, I would say it's like this is the first AI that I've actually been able to have full back and forth conversations with, and I don't even have to click on my screen at all. Like it's completely hands-free. I don't even touch my phone, and I just have a full back and forth conversation about like interesting topics.
Yeah, done the
That
same thing.
I
yeah,
know, I
and
love it. It's so much better.
like this it seems like an inflection point here. Like this is the first system, like whatever you call it, an AI a system, because obviously like the how you code the interface plays a role as well. But I think that's really like fundamental there. And then like I think you're maybe alluding to this, Brandon, but something that I've kind of talked with Martin Shkreli about is there's like the concept of once we're actually able to train the model directly on audio instead of having to convert the audio to text and then train it on the model, like that will be even bigger, because then the model will even be able to understand all the nuances of the inflection and intonation of the
But it might
voice.
need to integrate with the text models in some way, like a mapping between them, because like there's way too much
Integrate
text
with what?
data
I'm sorry, I didn't
compared to
catch
voice.
what you said.
Are you asking what I said, Nora? Do you want me to repeat what I was saying, Nora?
I think
Okay.
they'll just have access to that data, and naturally, when you can talk, you might prefer it, because if you're trying to communicate some of the nuance through what you're saying, then it makes a lot of sense. But text
Yeah.
still works in a lot of cases.
Nah, I don't think that's going to be that useful, honestly.
But yeah,
I
I'll let
wanted to
somebody
share
else
kind of
talk,
why.
whoever wanted to speak.
Yeah,
Oh,
go ahead.
is that me? Am I up?
Well, I see like 3 people's hands up.
Well,
David,
Walter
Rory,
literally
and
hasn't
Walker.
said anything, and
Sure. No worries. I
like
can wait.
after like it was just me and him in the chat, and then we were talking, and then after someone else joined, so he can speak. I think he deserves that at least.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, I was just going to say, is anyone training sort of models on video as well? Transformer models with video and audio. So you just said that basically it'd be better to replace text with audio. So would the ultimate training set just basically be documentaries where someone's talking over sort of contextual video as well?
Yeah, they have that. Like you can use transformers on video, and then it can, like, for car data, like video data from cars. It can like predict the future, and it can like, okay, so if you're watching video, maybe someone can put it on the Jumbotron, or I will when I'm done speaking. Yeah, you just look. The model, the transformer will just look in the future, and then when it's dreaming about the future or predicting the future is what happens with a transformer. So you basically just see the video of the car like turning left. You see the video of like cars coming in and out, and it does have a little bit of a hallucination factor. I think that's probably because of compression, because it's very data hungry. But yeah, I'm pretty sure LDJ knows a lot more about this than I do. And then maybe after David can speak.
Yeah, I was just gonna say real quick on that. Jan LeCun actually just came out with. I'm not sure if the model is officially published yet, but it's in preprint right now. It's undergoing peer review, but there's something called JEPA. It's kind of like a very grand like new architecture that they're trying to move towards. But they just released something called iJEPA, which is an image specific version that was already beating a lot of image based specific models. And then just very recently, now there's VJEPA, which is Video JEPA, and apparently that's having new state-of-the-art video understanding, while also actually like seeming to have new state-of-the-art image understanding as well, which is, I mean, like you would kind of guess that would happen, hopefully, but this is kind of one of the first models that shows that. So yeah,
I feel like that's wild, and that's happened like wildly fast, because I just feel like less than a couple months ago, we weren't anywhere near that. That's why I don't know. It's like freaking. I'm like, damn, things are moving so fast. It's it's kind of
It's
exciting and
exhausting.
kind of yeah. I'm not scared because I'm not a D-cell, so I think it's kind of cool.
Lol. Yeah, I was gonna add my particular usage of ChatGPT voice, like voice chat mode. It's pretty cool. One of the ways that I really like to use it, this was like I basically sat down and just started talking through this like product
Anytime I'll
idea,
show you guys how I
and
use it.
for hour and a half, 2 hours, digging into this idea from the perspective of product, and then from the perspective of engineering,
and then dug into the details about the data model and the tools. Came back and revisited some questions about the product, got some summaries together. So, like, just doing this on a drive or doing this on a walk, it's totally doable, and it's pretty darn awesome. Such a good way to think, because you can like kick back a particular point by saying, okay, let's revisit this a little bit later, and then you can be like, okay, so what were some of the other points that we wanted to like address here, and it's kind of like it works so well that it really feels like we are addressing this together. It definitely is not as good as talking with people like on spaces like this, but there are other wins. Like you get to really drive it all, and in spaces there's like a lot more of a social responsibility thing. Like if you like talk over too many people, then you probably won't be adding very much to the conversation. Um, but it is pretty valuable, right? You can interrupt it, you can kind of drive it yourself. That being said, if you interrupt it too much, then you actually kind of could corrupt the like conversation a little bit, and you have to like think about it a little bit differently. But
100%. Like we need the ability to just vocally interrupt, interject, and it won't continue. It won't use extra. It won't fit into the context the things it was saying after. Like these are such low hanging fruit.
yes,
There's also other ideas I have. I need to write them down, but just like if you interrupt
two
it
that I
halfway, it's
wish.
like speculative and like it's just very low hanging fruit. Just some simple logic can improve it a lot more. I think Apple is like definitely seeing that, and like they're gonna drop like an audio only like interface that's like as good as GPT-4 in the next like couple of years. It's gonna like blow people's minds.
I think that if it goes to, I see like LDJ, I see your hand up, but in case you're going to change the topic, like uh, two of the things that I wish for, and I actually think will have a very good chance to be solved with with the actually like not text to speech and then ChatGPT and then speech to text, but instead like actually voice going in there. Like two big points that I think are actually going to have a good chance of being solved. One is the ability to interrupt. I think maybe, right? Maybe. But the other one that I think is even more annoying is when you're talking to one of these systems, you have to do this filibustering thing where you're
Oh
filling
yeah,
the
yeah, yeah.
silence
By the way,
because otherwise it's going
you
to
can
take
get
it
around
from
that.
you.
You can get around that with holding it down and then releasing when you're ready on GPT-4 chat. But
But
it
now
doesn't
you
always
have to
work.
like
Sometimes it's
be
still.
touching the thing,
Yeah, there's
right?
nothing
So
that
it's not
enrages me
voice.
more. Yeah, yeah. There's nothing that enrages me more than that. That's what the speculative thing was. It's like it'll just answer and answer, and then if you continue talking, it'll just scrap that and continue listening. You know what I mean? Like that's the worst case. You know what I mean by that?
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
or like yeah. So th th
Like yeah. So
those
that's
those are
really
big
easy to
ones.
implement. I agree. And just LDJ. Sorry.
I think it might even be like relatively trivial to solve, even if you just have something that's constantly getting a measure through some algorithm of what was like the inflection change in the most recent 10 seconds of speech. And then depending on that, having like judging whether or not it should start talking.
It's not
Because
just about that. It's like, did they actually complete their thought as well? So there's semantic things as well as intonation.
yeah,
Equals
exactly.
yeah.
And actually something I wanted to just butt in real quick with, and then it's a little bit off topic, so I'm glad you kind of, continue with the current topic for a little bit, Roman. But right now, just a friend, he's working on a big project of just like open source, getting like a vector database of a ton of popular data sets, and just if anybody has recommendations right now of what he should maybe add to that project, and he'll like publicly for free upload pretty much embeddings and stuff of whatever data sets. Yeah. I was gonna ask multiple people like Farrell and you guys. Farrell, do you have any recommendations? If not, we'll just go back to the other topic real quick.
Well, we have early on in the MOE project, we like standardized a shit ton of data sets. So like
Oh, so he could just use that.
you could use those
Yeah,
exactly.
but
Yeah,
what is the link to that? What is the project?
it's the Hydra LM
Okay, okay. All right, all right.
org, and you'll just find like hundreds of data sets. Like just literally, you can just take some of the ones that were post processed too, right? Like, but I guess you might want everything. So take everything, download them, and dedupe, right? Like it's not that hard.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Yeah. And then just as a reminder of what the previous topic was before I got it off track, we were talking about audio stuff, guys.
Can I suggest a data set for you real quick before we move on to
Oh
that?
yeah, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Gorilla dataset is a bunch of
Oh, for
APIs.
API, yeah, API Gorilla.
Yeah, and they just released open functions, which is like a bunch of like function calls basically. It's kind of like a wrapper you can slap onto whatever OSS LLM and then call it that way. But both of those might be pretty useful to include into
Okay, thank you.
like an
Yeah.
actionable model. Yeah.
So just to wrap up this tangent, and then we'll get on to John. Something to say. Um, I actually have a question about this. So, like, when you say like use embeddings, like I thought embeddings were super tied to like just a specific training of a specific model. I didn't think they were so like interchangeable like that.
In a
Maybe I should
way, so
update my understanding.
yeah, I'll read the exact message I got. So the person sent to me, he said, list any data set you think is important to have embeddings for. I'm going to upload lots of them with interfacing to Hugging Face to act as a vector database. Don't want to miss any important ones. But
That is
yeah,
an
there's
excellent
like,
point, though. By the way, whoever just made it, because I think there's two. Fuck, I forgot what it was. Like like this, either the size or the size of the vectors. Like OpenAI embeddings are different from the way some of the other open models are using them. I'll go check right now.
yeah, there's some like standardized ways in some sense that you can kind of like have virtually any model interact with a vector database of embeddings, but yeah.
Yeah, like in addition to just being a different dimension size, I'm not sure about the adaptive thing you're talking about, LDJ, but like each, I think each training run, like, well, each training run, the embeddings are being updated as the model is trained. And I think it's like not really deterministic depending on the algorithm. Probably need the same amount of data, the exact same data,
What do
exact
you mean
same model.
what do you mean it gets updated? Like no, the embeddings are not like are not being like you're like you're not training on like it's not an encoder decoder network, right? Like transformers are pure decoder networks. There's no like training
But
of
the embeddings still get refined until like the last transformer block, right?
So when you're talking about like embedding layers within like an LLM, like for all practical purposes, like that would be considered separate from what we're talking about here, which would be like embeddings for like a vector database.
yeah,
Right.
exactly. So
But
like
don't the embeddings have to have like some like a context?
so like you
Like
can take
sorry, go ahead.
Bird or something, right? And like you can embed like you can embed an entire data set into like a tensor that represents the data, right? And like it's basically like this shared latent space that all the data is kind of living in.
So you use that instead. So you do, is it like a token two embedding mapping, and you reuse that mapping to train new models? Is that what you kind of mean?
Do you project
No, no,
that?
you don't use it to train. Like the purpose of the embedding, I mean, like theoretically, I guess probably you could maybe in some way, but like the purpose of the vector database of like that is not like the main purpose is not for training models. It's more for like searching knowledge and information and like being able to compare and see nuances of how a certain data set is compared to a different one or things like that.
Okay, so it's still like your search terms are turned into tokens. Uh, yeah, okay. Yeah, I get that there's different ways to generate embeddings, and I just need to look into like vector databases, I guess. Sorry, Jiang wanted to say something, and then LBJ, if you want to add. Oh, well, Jiang, yeah, you've been waiting for long enough. What did you want to say?
Oh, hello. Thanks to the host for letting me jump up and speak. Yeah, I was just kind of curious if anybody's thinking at all about or trying to figure out what Wolfram Alpha is going to be doing next, since they have such a such a tight grip on the market, so to speak. You know, like they're kind of like a monopoly, like selling their software to like all these labs, companies, universities. Uh, and I'm thinking like, with you guys were talking about, you all were talking about audio, with Chat GPT, and like maybe I don't know if OpenAI seems like they would probably prop up some kind of math tutor sort of thing with the audio, maybe. But yeah, it's just kind of weird that we heard about Wolfram Alpha's plugin that one day when plugins got announced, and then a lot of stuff happened, and now it's just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of curious what their next move is. And with QStar training, like there's a little bit of a topic around mathematics. I think George Hotz was playing around with that idea in his recent stream, and so yeah, it's kind of, I don't know if that's off topic, but yeah, also Wolfram Alpha uses a lot of public data sets. I don't know if that's what.
No, we are talking about like the cutting edge kind of thing, and Q Star is definitely, even though it's
Okay.
very speculative, it is.
I will say, I remember sometime around like mid 2013, 14, something like that. I mean, I specifically remember somebody at AI posted like a blog post about they had done some cool stuff, with some video game systems and training and whatnot and research, and they specifically made a call out to having used, I think, Wolf Mathematica, which is now called Wolfram Desktop. But so yeah, I think they pay for licenses probably at OpenAI, and maybe some of their researchers use that. But yeah, I don't. It's just a curiosity because, like I said, they're like a huge monopoly on the math education.
Yeah, I mean, I think math education is even like we were talking before, and LDJ, I'll let you speak after this. We were talking before about, oh, Google's going to be the next big thing, ChatGPT is going to be the next big thing, but like they can be both big when we're talking about billions. So math education could be in the tens of millions, but there's still a lot more that these models can, that this architecture can do. It's not just limited to like tiny slivers, or even if they're really big in a lot of ways. Sorry, LDJ.
Yeah, I think Wolfram Alpha, like I've kind of been talking about this with some colleagues here and there a lot. Like they definitely do feel like a little bit of a monopoly, and I'm surprised kind of that it doesn't seem to be like even after I've looked, it doesn't seem to be an open source implementation or really like a solid competitor to it at all. Like they've been having the stronghold of a really good, like, I would probably even call it in a lot of ways, it's still a superior AI to ChatGPT in, like, certain ways when it comes to hard, like mathematical, low hallucinations, things like that. And, you can ask it, like, how many calories in, like, 1 gram of an apple or, like, even much more complex things. And I think they do actually have, if you look back in the past 3 years, and by the way, I hear somebody's keyboard typing.
I
I
thought
don't
that
know
was yours because I don't see.
Oh,
Oh,
sorry,
it's
that's me.
yikes.
My bad.
it's not my end. Yeah. But yeah, if you look back in the past like 3 years or so, Apple was actually using Wolfram Alpha initially for like through Siri, and Siri was able to directly access that and everything. And then they stopped using it. Just I think I want to say within the past 2 or 3 years. And I heard some things here and there, and along with, that thing that happened with Siri, apparently Wolfram Alpha is kind of looking to ramp up like their whole thing, and they already have that moat of Wolfram Alpha. And I think it's only a matter of time until we have much, much smarter AI with less hallucination rate, at least when it comes to STEM subjects. Because all it would take is something that is like deeply integrated with a strong LLM attached to Wolfram Alpha. Yeah.
There was a video where he was giving a demo recently, and it looked like it looked like maybe some of his engineers had like concocted like a local, in-house kind of LLM, and he was trying to demonstrate it, and the thing was hallucinating like crazy, and he was like obviously perturbed a little bit, like he usually is when he gives live demos that are with buggy, kind of releases. Um, but also like their API, they have like little bit of a weird API, but you can specify timings, and depending on the timing that you manipulate, those scanner pods, whatever they call those, can consume more time and try to get better results. And then, like if you're using a browser, since it's just a couple of JSON calls that are just callbacks that when the pod is ready, it'll come back into your browser. So your page will slowly build up with more content while you're looking at it. I guess you could call that streaming. And
Yeah, that's what people were saying. Like Q star might be like better inference time because inference is really cheap compared to training. And if we could use like 10 times more compute on inference to get like 10 times better results, like that's pretty much always going to be worth it.
so I'm guessing, they'll do something with streaming. Like if OpenAI, is going to try to help prop up Wolfram as a kind of like a, hey, look what you can build with ChatGPT, um, kind of like a partner demo, then they might do something with streaming related to that kind of mathematics. I don't know. But
We
anyway,
definitely need. Sorry, go ahead.
I'll step down to listening. But thanks for letting me speak.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for your thoughts.
Yeah,
I
I just
definitely
want
think it's
to.
like.
Yeah, go on. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I definitely think we need a disciplinary approach. Like I know Jeff Hawkins, he wrote these books on intelligence, A Thousand Brains. He's doing like some out of left field stuff that's like, what the hell are you even talking about? Like even though he's done really good research, like if he just posts something about it, like no one's going to listen to him, or he doesn't have like the popularity of these AI projects that actually have traction and stuff. But it's
Well,
not that it's
actually,
any less valid.
let's talk about that because it is an interesting like theory, and I know that LGJ is also excited about that research direction or those ideas, I guess. Maybe you want to take like a quick stab at it and like give an overview.
Yeah, I was actually just wanting to respond to the other guy real quick of what he was saying with how Wolfram Alpha. We know it can actually run locally, and just like while we're still on the Wolfram Alpha topic, like there's actually some Raspberry Pi versions, like special editions that came with like versions of Wolfram Alpha, and you can actually run it on the Raspberry Pi fully locally, but like it's not open source, like it's still like, ironically very closed source and locked down within the Raspberry Pi, and it just comes with it. But like, we at least know it's efficient enough to, if it can run on a Raspberry Pi, that means even an iPhone can definitely do it fast. So, I mean, this really makes me excited for the possibilities of if they were to open source something like that, or if an open source implementation was made, like how good can we have local AI with low hallucination?
But
Sorry, I was
yeah.
honest here. Sorry, I was distracted for a moment. You were saying that what can run in Raspberry Pi? Is it like the Jeff
Pretty much
Hawkins
like
theory?
Wolfram Alpha has
Okay.
already been ran on Raspberry Pi, but it's not open source. It's closed source and it's locked down. But it makes it really exciting that if somebody did make an open source implementation successfully of Wolfram Alpha, then that could be something that is like if it could run on a Raspberry Pi, it could definitely run efficiently on an iPhone.
Is that the
So
full one, or is that just an API interface?
no, like it can run offline on Raspberry Pi.
Oh,
But
oh,
like
okay.
it
But that's
apparently
because it's deterministic, doesn't it? Wolfgang has, I mean, is doing arithmetic math in a deterministic way. I remember looking at a paper a few months ago where they went into, I think it was even ChatGPT or another LLM, and they found to try to find out how it was doing arithmetic, and I think it was some very basic mathematics like multiplication or division, and it was doing that on a probabilistic approach. So it came out with its own algorithm, and it was probabilistic. Does somebody remember that paper? Because I can't find it anymore.
there's a lot of papers like that, but yeah, Wolfram Alpha is like pretty deterministic. It's and that's what's great about it. It's virtually like extremely low hallucination rate, and it shows all the work of everything it did
Mhm.
to get like to its answer, and it has like an actual database it has access to that's really efficient. But Yeah, I mean, there's that whole thing. But if we want to switch back to the topic that we're gonna head to anyways, which is Numenta and everything, I would say if Jeff Hawkins does actually have something that is like a that and like wrote paper and everything, I think it would come about. Just the current stuff I've seen come out of his lab seem to be still like some use cases, but very niche and still kind of working their way to making something that could benefit like all general use cases, you know?
Maybe he needs a Sam Altman to like just come in there and fuck shit up. Nissan, you wanted to say something?
Yeah, I'm starting to think that the models are good enough. Our prompt engineering around how they respond completely sucks. It's just over a year something years behind.
The whole
Hard
point is
agree.
that the models need to get good enough to not require prompt engineering, right? Like the prompt engineering is the is actually like the negative, like the negative case, right? Like the reason we actually prompt engineer is because we can't get the models to do what they like, to understand what our request is directly and to reason about it and to actually make the final like take the final decision or action or whatever like to fulfill our request. So that's why we prompt engineer.
Yeah, I know. I was just I've been trying it since Austin put up OpenChat.team, and that's a Mistral fine tune. And I was trying to use it to like actually just use it, and it's very good for snippets of code. Like if you want to something what to do, you want like a React template, you want something on DevOps or whatever you want. It actually gives out even better answers. Like the code has been trained on is pretty excellent. It just really sucks at following up the conversation and remembering things on forward. That's the part that I think there's some extra magic going on with OpenAI that like even GPT 3.5, it is way more natural when you go forward in the conversation. Uh, Whereas these are like they give great answers right away, and then they don't really follow on along. So there's some magic going on there that we have none of us have figured out.
Is it an additional step in the training regimen of the model? Like, is it something other than the process that they've described in their papers, which is basically like pre-train, supervised fine-tune, then like RLHF type of optimization, right? Like, is there something else there, or um, is it just because of the scale, or is it something architectural, like besides like like more MLOps type of shit and prompt engineering and stuff like that? That like I I don't know. Does anyone have any thoughts?
To me, it feels like context memory to keep track of the session and the prompts. That's what ChatGPT does very, very well, and I think other models not so much. So it's the interface, I think the interface on the server side.
Where
Yeah,
my head
there's
goes
some
immediately,
background
and
processing going on, definitely.
if you guys have looked at, I
What?
haven't looked at the in depth of the data sets that the guys have been using on their fine tunes on top of Mistral. But where my head goes immediately is like, is it possible that those fine tuned data sets just don't have enough turns in conversation? That's why maybe your chat just sort of gets progressively worse. Where OpenAI didn't mind, like they'll pay people $2 an hour to, make a data set that has like 30, 40 back and forths in a conversation.
You're not wrong, but we identified this as a problem a few months ago. Well, kind of recently. And the newer data sets that LDJ and the guys have been making are actually multi-turn. And that hasn't that's I still don't think that's it. Hey, that's definitely part of it, but there is something in how they process the queries, how they summarize it, what prompt format they use, what they actually show, what they don't. It's there's shit going on there.
Because just think of like how OpenAI
Yeah.
has solved everything else so far. So far, their major transformations have been like
people underestimate how much to do something. And it's like, all right, okay, I was going to train on 10 GPUs, and OpenAI was like, what if I do 10 fucking thousand, not like 100 or 200, right? And so maybe it just seems like a pattern of like that's how they solve problems. It's just the amount it takes to do something particularly well and way better than the past way is maybe takes a lot more than we think it does. I don't know.
I think you definitely like need that. You need that raw compute because like the amount of like possible networks from training is like really high, and you need to be able to like find if something is actually like you need to basically train it for a
But
long time to find out if it's useful.
do you need one big muscle, or could you just use a trillion ants?
I don't think we already use that every time you fine tune a model. You're building upon 10,000 hours of GPU. Like it's no one's training from scratch, right? Well, some are.
Well, I'm not.
Well, some are.
Well, I'm not. For you, and this is going to sound aggressive. It's not meant to be aggressive. How come I don't hear people like you talking about building a federated or a decentralized version of this stuff? How come nobody in EAC talks about how easy it would be to create an EAC GPT?
Because it's early days and there's so much low hanging fruit everywhere.
BS, dude. BS. That means everybody's being selfish and all they're trying to do is their own thing. Nobody's actually trying to build anything for the community, right? That's what I hear.
It's because
it's a bunch of people acting like they're trying to accelerate and nobody's actually building anything that would help the community. What happens right now when GPT is down? What happens when GPT just goes down? Do we all just accept that we have to wait for it to turn back on again?
We have other models. Go to openchat.team or download any of the ones you can use offline.
The second GPT
right, but I'm saying how come there
was the perfect opportunity to start using open GPTs, which is what I tried to kick off at the time. I might be cutting out here though.
not trying to talk shit. Like I'm here for everybody here. I love audio.
There's this thing called the myth of technological inevitability, where it's like people think, like.
Why are we not raising, training, tuning, and designing a GPT that just accelerates people? Right? Well, it doesn't fuck around. If you want to ask it a bad joke, ask it a dirty joke. If you want to ask it the fucking answer to the universe, motherfucker, that thing's gonna give it to you.
That's what Martin Shkreli was talking about. Like, it's not gonna censor any shit.
Sorry, I'm speaking over someone. Go.
Yeah, I'm just gonna mute you again. Sorry, X. Make sure to like turn off your mic, just temporarily. If if you're not speaking. Sorry, Farrell, you can continue.